I was asked yesterday, only yesterday, to run a lightning talk as a replacement for a session that was not happening right now. So I was thinking what I want to talk about, and like picking something controversial is always a good idea. Thus, transparent salaries. So I was sitting the other day at the office. It was already afternoon, and I wasn't at my best, but I still wanted to make myself useful somehow. So I decided to write this blog post that summarized the outcomes of introducing transparent salaries at Lunar Logic. So I finished the post, I hit publish, I went home, and the next thing I know is that traffic on our blog went through the roof. So these are statistics from our blog, and it's not that no one reads our blog ever. It's just really that the post got a lot of traction. In a matter of an hour or so, we were on the very first page of Hacker News. So we've obviously started getting a lot of comments. Well, interestingly enough, people weren't as supportive as I would expect. So people went ahead to tell us how bad idea it was to introduce transparent salaries. They would tell us that we would scare our employees off, that we would make them angry, that we would discourage good professionals to join the company in the first place. Hell, there was one guy who said it will fail because it is against human nature. Senior as we are still doing that, and we are doing fairly fine. There's one guy at this conference who I treat as an owner with a store of ideas. This is Don Reinertsen, and I will use him to explain why transparent salaries is a good idea and how to do it right. So what Don Reinertsen says when he's talking about decentralizing control, he mentions two elements. That we need to give people authority to make decisions, and we also need to give people information relevant to make those decisions correctly. So when you are talking about making information available, well, that's simply transparency. And that's a kind of an easy move. You want to go transparent with your salaries, it's enough to pin the payroll to the wall and voila. Well, as a matter of fact, there are companies out there that go even further. They would pin the payroll to the internet wall, so everyone can see it. This is the payroll from Buffer. However, if we stick to transparency and transparency only, the only outcome that we can expect is frustration. Why? Because imagine that you put your payroll to the wall, and then people suddenly see all the unfairness that is there. And then they realize that they cannot do anything to improve the state of things. Thus, frustration. So we need the other element, and I frame it as autonomy. Although you can, in this context, you can say that it's having influence on how the things look like. It may be about formal authority, it may be about full autonomy, it may be just about having some influence. And there are different strategies that you can adopt to make that happen. So this is, again, Buffer. They do have the salary formula. It's a simple algorithm, and the outcome of that algorithm would be a number, and this is your salary. Well, we didn't want to go down that path because we appreciate some things that are not that easy to measure, like influence on organizational culture or character traits. Another strategy is having an appraisal system. Well, in this case, every now and then you are getting appraised, and one of the outcomes of the appraisal is your new salary. We didn't want to go down that path either, because I said that, well, we can do that over my dead body. And no one was determined enough to kill me in the process. So what we ended up with is kind of a discussion-based system. So whenever anyone thinks that anyone else, or themselves for that matter, deserves a raise, they start a discussion and they offer a proposition. Then other people chime in and they're sharing their opinions and whether that person should get a raise or not, or how big the raise should be. And finally, whoever started the discussion, they make a decision about the salary. That's it. As simple as that. So one remark I frequently hear when I'm sharing that idea is that, well, it's subjective. It's like trading opinions. Well, To some point it is, but my answer to that is that collective subjectivity is as close to objectivity as it gets. As a matter of fact, if you ask people at Lunar, what do they think about that system, they would say that since we adopted it, the fairness of our payroll is much better than it used to be. There are, however, other outcomes of introducing that system that we couldn't predict. And probably the most important one is how transparent salaries boosted peer-to-peer feedback. So let's imagine that I have a critique to offer to one of my colleagues. But then I have no idea when someone is going to start a salary thread for that colleague. But once it is started, well, I will want to write down that critique because, well, I want to share. But because I'm respectful, I will first go to that person and tell them about that face-to-face. But then the answer would be like, hey, Paweł, why didn't you tell that to me 3 months ago? I could have done something about that. So I'm incentivized to share feedback frequently and in just-in-time manner. I look at the historical data in all our salary threads, and for any discussion about salary, there is anything between 7 and 15 people sharing their opinion. So what you can say is anyone at Lunar has at least 7 connections with people that have fully developed opinion about that person. So I tried to map it, and I had to stick to between 5 to 6 connections because the picture is already too messy. So what you are looking at is a picture of our network. And this network works as a safety network. So whenever someone is underpaid, they would be brought up by that network. Whenever someone is overpaid, that network would take care of that person not going even further from what we believe is fair. But what I also notice is exactly the same network works as our learning network. So whenever I have something that I want to share with people, I will most likely share it with people who I collaborate with. And then they will bring it further. So it's also our kind of rapid learning network. And because of that network, the whole system is anti-fragile. It's not mistake-proof. We did make a number of mistakes, but whenever we make a mistake, that network makes sure that it will be corrected over time. And not only that, it helps us to improve the system in the long run, so we are making fewer mistakes. So when we started, I've had this assumption that actually making salaries transparent is not a problem at all once the system is in place. That the only issue is the transformation. And 2.5 years later, well, that assumption has proven to be right. So do yourself a favor and consider trying it at your organization. Thank you very much.